Today, I want to talk to you about three things. One, I want to talk to you about football because the Super Bowl was yesterday. And I figure since I don't like either one of those teams, no, I'm just playing. Two, I would like to talk to you about metaphor. I've been teaching a class this semester of 10 brilliant student poets, and we always begin the semester talking about metaphor. And three, I am going to give you a recommendation for music to make love to. Y'all are laughing. Wow. Y'all don't want to make love? So actually, I'm not going to talk too much about football, but I am going to give you a sentence as I am speaking, and it's going to make use of football. I really want to talk to you more about metaphor because I am a poet. As you know, a metaphor is the comparison of two very different things. And every metaphor has two parts. You know that intuitively. I'm going to give you an example. Here comes football. The linebacker was a bear. Hear that sentence? That sentence happens in two parts. You have the real thing, that's the linebacker, and the imagined thing, that's the bear. Now, already we are working to stimulate your imagination. Every time I say bear, you see a bear. You are very far away from the woods, and yet, you can see a bear. Some of you have never actually seen a bear. And yet, when I say bear, you see a bear. That is where metaphor begins. It stimulates the human imagination, whether we like it or not, whether we want it to or not. Now, though the sentence is, the linebacker was a bear, when you go to the stadium, you do not expect to see a bear. As a matter of fact, I will entreat you now. If you ever go to a football game and see a bear, run. So in the sentence, the linebacker was a bear. The linebacker is the real thing, and the bear is the imagined thing. If the bear is the imagined thing, then the bear is how we better know the linebacker. We understand just how ferocious the linebacker is. You can't get this from ChatGPT. It can't do that for you. Do y'all see what I mean? All right, so every metaphor has two parts, and there are real names and real definitions for those two parts. I'm going to give you the Jericho Brown definition so you do not have to get nervous. Every metaphor is made up of a tenor and a vehicle. The tenor is the real thing, and the vehicle is the imagined thing. I am going to help you remember this for the rest of your life. You are going to be walking around with this information. Have you ever heard of a singer named Luther Vandross? Oh, y'all like Luther Vandross. Those of you who have not heard of Luther Vandross, I'm about to change your love life. Luther Vandross's voice was so sultry that I believe he is probably responsible for the conception of many of the people in this room. Now, I never had the talk with my dad, but one of my older cousins told me that if I could get alone in a room with another person and Luther Vandross was playing in the background, everything else would take care of itself. Y'all don't hear me. Y'all don't like it. Y'all don't make love. Luther Vandross was a tenor. He was a man singing out to the world to be better known. He wanted to be heard, which is what singers want. The tenor is the thing that you want to know more about. And the vehicle, just like planes, trains, and automobiles, they take us to the tenor. They're the way we better know the tenor. When I say the linebacker was a bear, you better know just how ferocious that linebacker was. Y'all with me? Y'all understand tenor and vehicle? Oh, y'all are doing a great job then. So, you probably also understand that every time a metaphor is made, You're going to see this for the rest of this week. You're going to notice yourself using metaphors, and you're going to hear other people using metaphors. Every time a metaphor is made, it is made out of desperation. We so desperately need you to understand the linebacker that we are willing to use a bear to do it. Y'all see that? When poets are writing poetry, they are working with what has to be an urgent response. They are working with what has to be an urgent stimulation of the imagination. That urgent stimulation of the imagination can only happen by way of clarity and precision. When you know your tenor and you know your vehicle, you can have clarity and precision. Not only that, you have, through the power of metaphor, the opportunity to discuss things you do not understand, the opportunity to discuss things you have experienced but cannot articulate. For instance, many of us have a hard time talking about childhood experiences or our family. But if you tell me my mother was a bear, I know exactly what you mean. My Uncle Jay would come in from work and he would just, be frazzled. He would have had a long day. He would slam the door behind him and take his clothes off. And he said, "Woo, it's a bear out there." And I knew what he meant. I didn't look out the window for a bear. You see what I mean? If you have troubles with mental health, you might say, there's a bear in me clawing at my brain. You'll see that? And now we understand better what's going on. Here's a poem. This gives you an example. I want you to remember when you hear this poem that rivers don't have faces. People do. It's a poem by Langston Hughes. It's a very short poem, and it reads like this. Suicide's note. The calm, cool face of the river asked me for a kiss. That's the whole poem. It's good, ain't it? I like Langston Hughes. He's the best. He's one of my favorite poets. So that's what I was teaching the first couple of weeks of school. The next week of school, I taught conceit. Conceit is simply an extended metaphor. So let's say you have a bunch of linebackers and stadiums and cheerleaders in a poem associated with forests and bears and campfires in a poem, then you're working in metaphor. When you say the face of the river, you're working in metaphor, but when you say it asked me for a kiss, you are now working in conceit. Do y'all see what I mean? Because that metaphor is moving across the poem. I'm going to recite for you now a poem of my own that will give you an example of how conceit works in poetry. And I'll give you a hint. This poem has as its tenor, my father. And it has as its vehicle, the Father. Prayer of the backhanded. Not the palm, not the pear tree switch, not the broomstick, nor the closest extension cord, not his braided belt, but God, bless the back of my daddy's hand, which, holding nothing tightly against me and not wrapped in leather, eliminated the air between itself and my cheek. Make full this dimpled cheek, unworthy of its unfisted print, and forgive my forgetting the love of a hand hungry for reflex, a hand that took no thought of its target, like hail from a blind sky, involuntary, fast, but brutal in its bruising. Father, I bear the bridge of what might have been a broken nose. I lift to you what was a busted lip. Bless the boy who believes his best beatings lack intention, the mark of the beast. Bring back to life the son who glories in the sin of immediacy, calling it love. God, save the man whose arm, like an angel's invisible wing, may fly backward in fury, whether or not his son stands near. Help me hold in place my blazing jaw as I think to say, excuse me. That's my poem. Thank you. Your tenor is not so scary if you know everything you need to know about your vehicle. I go as far as telling my students, if there's something you want to write about, find something to compare it to and just write about the thing you're comparing it to. That will let us know how you feel about the thing you really want to write about, and it takes the fear away as it relates to writing about that subject. So next week, we'll be moving from metaphor to metonym. I don't have time to get into what a metonym is, but I will tell you, you can imagine reading a poem that's all vehicle, where you know there's a tenor lurking behind the scenes. I'm going to read for you now a poem that I think makes use of metonym. It's a poem by one of my favorite poets, the poet Lucille Clifton. I feel like Lucille Clifton's favorite poet was Langston Hughes, so he's like my granddaddy and she's like my mom. So I'll read for you this poem. I want you to know that Lucille Clifton's papers are at Emory University. If you want to take a look at them, you can see her revisions, her journals, and even her grocery list. And you will see how the work she did is the kind of work that only she could do because she was living a human life. You cannot get a robot to write this next poem. So as a parting poem, here is a poem by Lucille Clifton. Cruelty. Don't talk to me about cruelty or what I am capable of. When I wanted the roaches dead, I wanted them dead and I killed them. I took a broom to their country and smashed and sliced without warning, without stopping, and I smiled the entire time I was doing it. It was a holocaust of roaches, bodies, parts of bodies, red all over the ground. I didn't ask their names. They had no names worth knowing. Now I watch myself whenever I enter a room. I never know what I might do. Thank y'all so much. Good night.